Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven, back on this Tuesday with a mix of paranormal spooky stories. I hope y'all enjoy them. Number 1. I used to be a long life skeptic. I don't believe in the supernatural and God or anything like that. And although it sounds cliche, since I've been living in the colonial city of Querétaro, I've started to have my doubts, seriously. It all began when we went to explore the back of my friend's house, who owns a restaurant. In the center of the city, all the houses are old, and this house was no exception. My friend, 2 other friends, and I went there. Suddenly, my friend and one of the friends stayed at the threshold of one of the doors. I asked them what was wrong, and they both claimed with a weird look on their face that there were ghosts in there. I scoffed at them, telling them they were crazy, and continued on. I didn't see or feel anything. They both insisted that they felt something. I guess because they are empathetic to the paranormal, which I recently learned. Every time I wanted to go to that place for dinner, my friend would refuse. She said there was very negative energy there. I went back many times and nothing happened. The only thing I could witness with my own eyes was during a New Year's party we celebrated there. 3 of my friends were surprised by something. I saw how a strand of one of their curly hair oddly remained horizontal. I didn't think anything of it. In fact, I found it funny. They just laughed nervously. And that was the only thing that happened that day. Now that I remember, it was surprising, but I remained in denial. Sometime later, when I had the chance, I asked the owners of the house if they had also seen or felt anything strange. They replied that they personally hadn't. The only incident was when they were renovating the bottom floor of the house, and they unearthed a tombstone with more than 100 years of history. Beneath what they say was the printing press of the convent of La Cruz. They also told me that many customers and employees of their restaurant had made comments about something or someone lurking in that part of the house. The only concrete story came from a kitchen assistant who told me that he had seen a little girl, and he was really scared, to the point of quitting that job. A few years passed, and I liked to visit a downtown craft beer bar at nighttime. I chatted with the bartender at the bar while talking about craft beer most of the time. One time, the topic came up. He told me that almost when it was closing time around 2:30 a.m., he saw a man leaning against the wall next to one of the refrigerators at the entrance. There as if he were drunk. He wasn't a real person. He said that the apparition didn't speak or do anything. It just appeared there. Obviously, I didn't believe him. 6 years after moving to the city, my friend accompanied me to another craft beer place, also located in the downtown area of the city. We had an event, and after it ended, she sat alone at one of the tables while I went to greet and chat with other attendees and friends. Suddenly, she called me and asked me to please leave. She was very insistent. I asked her why, and she replied that she felt a ghost and that it had actually pushed her and moved the bench. I reluctantly agreed, not without telling her she was overreacting. Some time passed, and I went back to that beer bar. Sometimes I chatted with the owner and sometimes the waiter. One time I asked the waiter if there were any ghost stories there, and he said yes. I let him tell me whatever he wanted without specific questions. He didn't give me any details, but he said that it used to be an old-style tavern, cantina in Spanish. And in the back room where my friend said she was pushed, there was a ghost woman, most likely a prostitute. She probably was there because she had been murdered there. It was that day and that moment when I started to believe people who claim to see and feel ghosts. Now I genuinely fear that I might perceive them someday. I feel it now as I write this. Number 2. Hello, this is my first post on the subreddit because I am relatively new to Reddit. I'm a little confused right now. Over the years, I have noticed strange occurrences, with some being related to spirits and ghosts of the sort. and other times I've just been a little too paranoid. However, as of late, I have felt like my surroundings are empty, despite being at college and surrounded by people. I feel like there is a recent lack of any paranormal occurrences or anything related to spirits nearby. It's almost like everything just vanished and is unsettling to say the least. I understand that while I am sometimes skeptical of spirits, this was one thing that I always felt was there and real, but it seems almost abandoned. Like I'm at college full of people, but how can there be no spirits? It might just be me, but something seems very wrong with that. I was looking through some posts and found that some people may deal with hauntings or possessions. So maybe something left my side. Any information on if there is anything that I could do would be great. Number 3. About 6 years ago, when I was 13, my family and I moved into the home of a family friend whose parents had passed away a few years prior. We all recently moved out once my dad got a job offer across the state, and I moved out on my own. The layout of the portion of the home this takes place in is difficult to describe, and I don't have really any photos that show the whole area. So I'm going to try my best to paint a picture here. The living room used to be what I would assume to be the dining room at one point in time. The whole room was long and open, besides a wall that divided the galley kitchen and the now living room, and the wall stopped about 3/4 of the width of the room. Past the galley kitchen, where there was a small breakfast nook, was the hallway that led to a washer and dryer and the door to the garage. If you stood in the middle of the room, you could see straight down that hallway. Above the sink in the kitchen, there was a small cutout that allowed you to see straight into the living room. Hung up high on a fireplace was a large TV, which you could see from the sink or the breakfast nook, and if it was off, it would reflect the hallway perfectly. The first time I have ever had this experience was probably about 2 years into my family living there. I was doing dishes at the sink, and I can remember looking up and catching the glimpse of someone in the hallway in the TV. I stared at it for a moment, trying to make out if it was the friend or a family member. But the more I stared at it, I realized it was none of them. Whatever or whoever the figure was tall and slender and visibly female from what I could make out. Every inch of the being was dark and almost void, but I could tell there was a hair falling down the side of its shoulders. For context, I am 5'4", and I was probably a little shorter at this time. My mother is 5'3", but this thing was clearly taller than me. I wouldn't call myself a skeptic, but also the kind of person who needs to fully debunk anything it could be before I truly start to believe it. So being curious and mustering enough courage to glance down the hallway, but to my surprise, there was nothing there. It was like it had completely disappeared. But whenever I glanced back at the TV, I could see it standing behind me. Back and forth ensued with me trying to figure out why I could only see it in the TV, and many attempts to try to look around and find anything that could be making this shape or figure out of thin air. I came up with nothing. Let's just say I didn't finish the dishes. For years, I would glance up and continue to see this same figure standing in the darkness of the TV, but every time I glanced over at the hallway, nothing. After some time, I became used to seeing it. She never moved, never made anything else move, and she never made a sound. She just stood there. So knowing there was no harm in ignoring it, I did just that. My parents never mentioned seeing anything. So I honestly started to believe my anxious brain was just creating things out of thin air, and I kind of completely forgot about it. My boyfriend and I started dating a few months before I moved out, and he had been over regularly and even spent the night on the weekends sometimes. We were exchanging ghost stories from our childhood, which most of mine took place in the previous home my family lived in. when I started to bring up this recurring encounter. Before I even had the chance to mention the TV aspect, my boyfriend suddenly became pale in the face and mentioned the TV. I followed up by asking him how he knew that because I hadn't ever mentioned it. He told me that he had gone into the kitchen to grab a drink one night and felt like he was being watched, and when he glanced up, he noticed something in the TV. I started to freak out, suddenly realized that I wasn't the only one to see it. He described everything about the figure to a point, the hair, and the height, and the position. Everything. What makes it weirder was that he only able to see her over his shoulder, making him feel like she was standing flush up against him. He only saw her once and never again, unlike me who had seen her so often that it was normal to me. I called my sister and father to ask them if they've ever seen it, but they both replied no. Also had some weird encounters of their own in different places of the house, meaning that for right now, as far as I'm aware, me and my boyfriend are the only two to have ever seen her, which makes this even more confusing. Number 4. Last night, December 15th, my grandma passed at 10 p.m. EST, India time, around 8 a.m. December 16th. I've missed almost all family funerals due to expenses, and the body is never held for longer than a day before cremation because of my family's choice in India. I've missed my grandpas, my aunts, and my grandmothers, all on my father's side, due to living in the U.S. Since I found out late last night, around 11 p.m., the thought of forgive me echoed in my head a million times as I sobbed uncontrollably. I just needed one sign to know she's forgiven me for not being able to make it yet to another funeral. I then called my dad to tell him what happened early morning of the 15th. Not sure it was related, but I had a dream. I dream a lot. I share especially when following events are strange. But since I moved into my new home, I've been here for 9 months, I never have any scary, uncomfortable dreams or other paranormal experiences, as I usually do in the hotels and in older places. Anyway, in my dream, I saw a woman float into my bedroom, a dead bride. Kinda weird, like a typical movie. And as I'm trying to get my husband's attention to tell him about this intruder, I get up to stop her. As I do, I get up from the dream. Naturally, I get very scared at night, especially due to nightmares. So I breathe heavy, wake up my husband, and I am unable to sleep throughout the night. I wake up the morning of the 15th for a doctor's appointment. As I drive to it, I think of how lonely this woman felt. Anyway, I was telling my dad this dream. Recall my TV went off, audio only. This has never happened to me before. My husband and I were on the couch, FaceTiming my dad. Both remotes were on the table. Nobody touched or sat on them. I usually have a sixth sense of things, but never would have predicted the passing of my grandma. Like a couple weeks ago, I had a dream my parents got into an accident, but they were both fine. That morning, right as I woke up, my mom called me and said Dad is feeling like he's having a heart attack. In the end, with God's grace, he was all okay. And it was all an accident, technically. My grandma lost her husband about a decade ago. Her daughter, who's my aunt, a little more than a decade ago. She always felt very lonely. She lived with my other aunt, but I knew she was very lonely and not happiest. Anyway, the TV audio turning on. I like to believe she gave me a sign. Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven on this Friday. They are wrapping up the roofing on my house. I'm excited. They're done, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. We have some haunted house stories today, and I hope y'all enjoy them. Number 1. So a few years back, I was doing online school, so I was home alone for most of the day. And this day, I was finished with my schoolwork, so I just was laying on my bed on my phone. And keep in mind, I was home alone. My dad and my stepmom were at work, and my stepbrother was at school. And suddenly, I started hearing these loud, heavy footsteps coming from the hallway. Also, my room is on the second floor, and it sounded like someone with heavy snow boots was slowly walking back and forth from my room to my dad's room, which was left from mine on the same side. And I just completely froze and paused the video I was watching on my phone. And it just kept walking back and forth, for I would say about 2 minutes. But at the time, it felt like forever. Eventually, it stopped, but I didn't move, as if I was in shock what I just heard. My initial thought was someone was in the house, but I never heard anyone walking up the stairs. By the way, the stairs and the upstairs is covered in wood, but after a minute of me just listening to see if I hear anything else, I got up to see what it was. So I opened my door, checked around the corner, and no one was there. I went to the bathroom window, which overlooks the front yard and driveway, to see if I could see any cars, but there was none. So I just went back to my room and locked the door. Around the same time that happened, I don't remember if it was before or after the incident happened, but one time, also home alone, I was laying on my bed on my side when I heard a voice in my right ear. Now, you could say that it was my brain just being loud, and I would agree with you, but I can't explain the hot breath I felt on my ear when it talked. And it was so close to my ear, it sounded like it was yelling, but I know it was whispering. I can't remember what it said, but I know it was just one word, and that was the only time that ever happened. Fast forward to a few months ago, nothing strange like that happened for a while. So I mainly forgot about it, and one night I was going to go downstairs to get some water, and for some reason I also always peek around the corner, see in the living room, just to see if anyone is there, because I get quite paranoid at night. So I walked down the stairs and started to peek into the dark living room, expecting nothing. But then I saw this shadow figure sitting on the couch. The only thing I could make out was the head shape and its shoulders. But past that, it was just a dark mass. I froze and I just stared at it. It didn't even move, just sat there in the dark. After a minute of just staring at it, I audibly said, "Nope," and went back upstairs and locked my door. I still peek around the corner at night, waiting for it to be back, but it never is. Number 2. I don't post often on Reddit, but after thinking on it for a long time, I decided to speak here about my encounters. I usually don't tell people about these experiences because I get the, "You're just seeing things," or "You're just young and we're probably dreaming," something to that extent. I'll also say that I never had a paranormal experience encounter since, and I am very thankful for that. The fear and the confusion that comes from seeing certain things is a lasting effect on the mind and is not something that I've forgotten. I get very emotional speaking about these nights in particular. I appreciate any insight you all may have, and thank you for taking your time to read this. My first encounter was when I was very young. I believe I was around 5 to 6 when it occurred. My household growing up was a very dark environment. My dad was an abusive alcoholic who would do emotional and physical harm to my 2 siblings, myself, and my mom. We never really had much, but aside from the abuse, we stayed together and loved one another. I'm not sure if it was the energy of that place or something that had happened there before that caused what I saw. My sister had been kicked out by my dad at the time. I was sleeping with her regularly. I was young and scared of the dark and generally just didn't want to sleep alone. One night, I woke up suddenly facing the window of my room. It was a small single-wide trailer. The rooms weren't big at all. My dad, being the way he was, had taken my door off because he didn't trust me for one reason or another. I just remember waking up, rolling over, and seeing this girl in a white dress in my open doorway. Her hair was black and she had no shoes on. Her hair covered her face and I couldn't see any of her features. I felt a foreboding feeling coming from her and I just knew I shouldn't blink my eyes. I was afraid she would rush up and be in my face when I opened them. So I stared as long as I could. As I did, I just felt this pulling sensation as if she wanted me to come to her. I knew that this wasn't a good idea, and to be honest, I was so scared that I was basically a statue. I stared as long as I could and eventually had to blink, but when I did, she was gone. I'm not sure of what would have happened had I went to her, but I'm glad I didn't. Keep in mind that during this time, I was too scared to watch horror movies or anything like that, so images like that was not normal to me. I'd never seen her before and definitely not after. My second and last encounter came about 1 to 2 years after that. I had just come home from a Valentine's dance and was getting ready for bed. I tended to sleep near my parents' room if I could on the couch because it felt safer. I had a great night with no negativity at all, which is what I can't explain about the situation even more. While trying to sleep, I started to hear a smacking noise, kind of like what people do who eat with their mouth open. I was very confused, so I looked down the side of the couch at the floor and saw what looked like a head. I stared at it for a bit because it was making the noise. Eventually, it slowly started looking up at me, and I could see that it had the features of an old man. It was smacking its mouth, and it looked like a lot of blood was coming out. I got so scared, and I jumped up, stomped on the head. I don't remember feeling anything solid other than the floor when I did so, and ran into my parents' room. I crawled in the bed beside my mom and tried to sleep. I wanted to check my surroundings because I was still feeling unsafe. I saw the head everywhere now, like it had duplicated itself. It was all over the sheets and on the floor beside the bed. All of them were staring at me and smacking their lips. All I could do is put my head under the covers and pray. Eventually, I fell asleep. I'm not sure if it was a toxic environment I grew up in or what that caused these to happen. I've never forgotten these experiences, and I have never even wrote this long of a post on Reddit, period. I just felt like I needed to get it off my chest and see what other believers might think. Thank you. Number 3. Hi everyone. My roommate and I think we have ghosts in our apartment, but we're not sure. Sorry if there's broken English, it's not my first language. So, everything that happens when each of us are alone. We haven't experienced anything like this when we are both together. We are believers, but still sometimes skeptics. First thing that happened to me, I was sitting in the kitchen by my roommate's bedroom door, and she wasn't home because she went home to her family for the weekend. Sitting in the kitchen, I heard something like a chair move behind her door. I just stopped everything. I was listening and tried to hear it again, but nothing. Mind you, this was just the day after we moved in. I like to think that was just our neighbors upstairs, but still not sure. The second thing that happened was to her. She was laying in her bed and heard a scream right next to her head. After that, she stopped everything she was doing and listened. So she heard something like maybe I was looking through my stuff in my bedroom. But I was not in the apartment. After moving stuff in my bedroom, she heard loud banging on the wall between our rooms, like someone just hit the wall really hard from my room. The last thing and the most scary thing happened to her, maybe about 2 weeks ago. She came from her singing class, she sings opera, and sat in the kitchen. She was singing something that she sang in her class, and right after she stopped, she heard someone like mimicking her voice. Sounded just like her, but didn't recognize the melody. She was intrigued and thought that someone is singing in the hallway, so she went to the door and she was going towards the voice, but it was moving away from her. And right when she stepped into the hallway, the voice stopped. She came to the door and kept listening for an elevator or door to close, but she didn't hear anything, and she found it very weird. We knew that before this apartment was leased to us lived an old couple. The man died, don't know when, where, or how, and the old lady is in her 90s in a retirement home. Thank you everyone in advance, if you read this story, and if you can comment your opinion, it would be really helpful. It would be really helpful. Number 4. I have a 19-month-old who the last few nights have been coughing in her sleep. She goes to daycare. She always has a cold. Around 12:30 a.m., she woke up. I suctioned her and she laid with me for a bit until she fell back asleep. I put her back in her crib and went to bed. Around 1:45 a.m., I randomly woke up and felt a small movement in the bed. When she is in my bed, she is able to slide off the side and get down. I thought that was what I was feeling. However, this means she would have had to crawl over my husband who was asleep and slide down, which would have woken him up. This is a loud walker, and I did hear a few steps to the door, and it looked like a small figure was trying to open the door, which I leave open a crack. She is able to pull the door open. As I'm looking, the door doesn't move. It just stays open, a very small amount. I'm thinking maybe she woke up and he got her, but when I asked her where she is going, there's no sound, and I can't really see a figure anymore. I get up and go into her room because I'm really freaked out now. She's asleep in her crib, not doing anything. She cannot get out of it by herself. So I go back to bed, but it takes me a while to fall asleep. Around 4 a.m., I feel movement in the bed again, and she's in the bed with us. I'm really weirded out, so I check the camera and I can see when I go in and check on her, and then I can see he goes in and gets her at 3:40 a.m. But none of this explains what happens earlier. Needless to say, I'm writing this because I am slightly freaked out and I can't go back to sleep. Has this happened to anyone else? Number 5. When my children were 6 and 8 years old, my husband and I had the opportunity to purchase his grandfather's house from the estate. It was a beautiful 1970s Rambler, an exclusive neighborhood. His grandparents had a complicated marriage. His grandmother, I will call it Rita, was a true grand lady of education and class. Hal was well liked in his community, but his family members had hard feelings about the way he treated Rita and the kids. The grandparents kept separate bedrooms. Rita had a room on the sunny side of the house. Rita passed away peacefully in the home. Hal died during surgery a year or so later. As we were doing some remodeling updating before we moved in, I could smell Rita's trademark lilac scent at the end of the hall by her room. I always felt a calming, peaceful presence in the sunlight in that room. It felt like her safe space. Eventually, the smell and presence went away. This house didn't have a pantry on the main level, but had a large pantry off the laundry room in the basement. This wasn't a traditional basement. The house was built on a slope, so the back half of the house had full sunlight. It's not a scary dark place. Yet, when I would ask the kids to go downstairs to get a can of diced tomatoes or something, they always hesitated. My daughter definitely told me she was afraid. This continued for a better part of 10 years. They both complained about the pantry, feeling sinister. I would sometimes wake up in the master bedroom feeling like I was being watched. In the doorway was a shadow that nearly filled it. It was a tall, slim man in a fedora, just the outline. This happened many times. In their teen years, the kids wanted more space and privacy, and eventually moved to bedrooms downstairs. I thought that was that. My husband and I divorced, and he moved across the country, and I downsized. Years later, I had my adult children in the backyard for an adult beverage one evening. We were talking about how none of us believed in ghosts, but there were things we could not explain. I was talking about the 1917 bungalow I live in now, and how certain places smell like ghosts, because the home is in an old part of town. When I first moved in, I sensed almost a ghost highway, like spirits were everywhere. When I mentioned the man with the fedora hat from their childhood home, their eyes got big. Both kids had experienced the man in the fedora in exactly the same way, waking up feeling watched to see a tall, slim shadow in the doorway with a fedora hat. We still do not know how to reconcile that with our skepticism. Alright, that's the end of the stories today. I didn't do 7 since some of the stories were longer than normal, so I only did 5. I hope y'all have a good weekend. I should see y'all tomorrow for our Creepy Pasta Saturday. I love y'all so much. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven. Good morning on this Thursday. I hope everyone is doing great. Sorry I was missing on Tuesday, but I was in a lot of pain on Tuesday, to be honest, and I couldn't even get out of bed to come record. But I'm here today feeling a lot more better. We have some haunted house stories for you today. Let's get started. Number 1. The old mansion had been abandoned for years, but it still stood proudly at the top of the hill overlooking the town. People would often talk about the strange occurrences that would happen there. Some claimed to have seen lights flickering in the windows at night, while others swore they heard the sound of someone playing the piano on still evenings. It was the talk of the town for a while, but as time passed, people forgot about the old mansion and went on with their lives. However, there was one person who couldn't stop thinking about it. His name was Jack, and he had always been fascinated by the old mansion's history. One day, Jack decided to investigate the old mansion by himself. He made his way up the winding path to the mansion's front door and pushed it open. Inside, he found a vast empty space covered in dust and cobwebs. The mansion was even bigger than he had imagined, and he couldn't wait to explore it. As he walked around, he noticed that some of the old furniture had been moved. It was as if someone had been living there recently. But that couldn't be possible, could it? Suddenly, he heard a sound coming from one of the upstairs rooms. It sounded like footsteps. Jack froze in fear, wondering who or what could be upstairs with him. Slowly, he made his way up the creaking staircase and down the long hallway. Finally, he reached the room where the sound had been coming. He slowly pushed open the door and gasped in shock. Inside, he saw an old man sitting at the piano, playing a hauntingly beautiful melody. The old man turned to look at Jack, and Jack saw the emptiness in his eyes. It was just then that Jack realized that he had just stumbled upon a ghost. The old mansion had been home to the old man, who had been a famous pianist in his time. When he died, his spirit remained haunting the mansion and playing the piano that he loved so much. Jack left the mansion, shaken but fascinated by what he had seen. From that day on, he would often visit the old mansion and listen to the ghostly music playing on the old piano. The old mansion may have been abandoned, but it was never truly empty. Number 2. A few months ago, I was driving past my house, and my bedroom curtains were open. I saw a female-like figure in my room with her back facing towards me. She looked foggy. Mind you, no one was home at the time. Since that, I have been feeling like I am being watched every time I'm in my room. Then the second occurrence was a few days ago. I have a standing shelf with candles in one of the cube spots. This was a large 3-wick candle that was in the middle of the shelf. The spot where that candle was, it wouldn't have fallen, but it did, and it wouldn't have gone far. So back to the story. I walked into my room and then sat down on my bed. I looked up and saw the candle fly across my room. It didn't scare me too much, but it was really strange. I told my family about the occurrences, and they believe it is the spirit of my mother. Please let me know if these are just coincidences or ghost spirit activity. Number 3. This is a house my dad lived in as a baby. My grandfather would go to the pub and leave my poor Nan with the baby in the country house with a shotgun to defend herself. She would sit in the living room and watch the lights swing back and forth without any prompting. She would hear sounds from elsewhere in the house also. She also saw an enormous milk barrel move of its own accord. There was a chapel on the grounds, so there were obviously stories of a ghostly monk. But when we turned up and asked the family who later moved into the house about these ghosts, they had no idea about them. What do you think? Number 4. Hi Reddit. As of writing this intro, this all literally just took place. I immediately went here to share my experience because I might lose some sleep tonight over this. I live on the second story of an apartment building, and my bed is against my window. So frequently I hear people talking outside. Most of the time, it's the kids playing soccer or our downstairs neighbors talking. But I never hear anything past 8 p.m. Currently, it is 10:10 p.m. as of writing this, and I can hear a little boy from my window. I checked outside and I can't see anyone. But the voice sounds like it's coming from directly below me. I can hear sirens in the distance. I can hear sirens in the distance. So at first I thought it was a part of the siren. I'm sure of it now. I can distinctly make out what the boy is saying. Mom, that's it. That's all he says. At first I paid no attention to it. But it's been several minutes now, and I've started to notice some strange things. Firstly, his tone never changes. It's as if someone recorded his voice and is playing it on repeat. He says, Mom, every 5 seconds or so, without skipping a beat. Second, the boy has been saying this over and over for the past 10 minutes, and still hasn't changed his tone or received a response from anyone, not even his mother. It's as if no one else can hear him shouting except for me. Originally, I wasn't going to post this, but it is now a few minutes later and something happened. He kept going on as per usual, but then I heard another voice, faint yet dominant. No. It was a male voice, raspy and toned. I listened in expecting to hear the boy's voice again, but I hear nothing, just the wind. Number 5. Sorry for the grammar, English is not my first language. When I was really young, around 13 years old, I encountered something strange. Yet, see, my family house was built with only one room, with everything from our eating area and sleeping area. As time passed, my parents would renovate it by building new addition to the house. When I got my own bedroom, there is a window leading to the kitchen area of the house. So most of the time, it's just closed. But one night, I was reading a book, and the window just displayed a white hand touching it. At first, I was confused and asked my mother if she was doing a prank on me. And she asked me what I'm talking about. But her voice came from my parents' bedroom, which is far from the kitchen. I was disturbed and stopped reading the book and just watched the window for a long time until eventually I fell asleep. In the morning, I asked my mother about it, and I know my mom when she is lying about a prank, and she's not lying at all. It was my first encounter with something supernatural, and I can still remember it till this day. Number 6. Growing up in an old house, I remember being home alone one day when I was using my mom's bedroom mirror. She had a bathroom in her room with a walk-in closet behind me. As I'm looking in the mirror, I started to hear a very mediocre whistling coming from this very dark closet. No windows. I turned around absolutely shocked, and it just continues. I was probably 15 feet away, staring into the darkness of the closet and saw nothing. But the whistling just continued, making mistakes and everything. I was like 12 at the time, so I ran out of the house terrified. I then told my mom what I had experienced, and she told me she would hear the whistling often at night when she would be trying to go to sleep. I experienced a whistling a second time at a completely different house. A little later, only this time I had my sister right beside me. It was coming from a screened-in back porch with a very low light due to the sun setting on the other side of the house. This was my second and last experience, and I never got any answers. Was wondering if anyone had any similar experiences or anything. Number 7. So, I've always been a man of science. Never really believed in ghosts. But waiting, some of the things here are interesting. I wanted to see what your opinion on the closest thing I have ever had an encounter was. I'm 18 at the moment, so this was well over a decade ago. Maybe about 12 years ago. I was getting ready for bed in my upstairs bathroom. As I was brushing my teeth, I turned around and very vividly saw someone for a split second. Looked to me like a young girl, maybe a few years older than I was at the time. Dressed in ragged clothing, just smiling at me. Naturally, being a very young child, I burst out screaming and my dad came running upstairs. It wasn't for long, but I can still remember exactly what I saw down to the facial features. I told him exactly what happened, and he just assumed I was tired and seeing things. But I've never had an experience like that from being tired. I feel like I remember it so vividly, but it would also just be because it was so long ago. Now, my sister is a very spiritual person, believes heavily in the supernatural, and thinks there's something living in our house. But we've lived there since it was first built, and all that was there before was a park with a playground. Anyone think there's anything to this? That is the last story of the day. I hope y'all enjoyed these short ghost stories. I love y'all so much. I will see y'all on Saturday for Creepy Pasta Day. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven. We have 2 creepy pastas today on this beautiful Saturday. Let's get to it. The first one I'm going to read is called It's All Fun and Games Until Your English Language College Class Can Hear Each Other's Thoughts. And it's written by Trash Tia. The men in black were definitely coming to dissect us. I was already jittery from the morning of keeping my head down, my music court, escaping the tsunami of thoughts gazing the back of my skull. They were so loud. I had been on canvas for an hour, thousands of voices already tangled inside my head, like fucked up radio. Can you eat 3 all-day pasta? I'm pregnant. I'm actually fucking pregnant. Across the hall, I spied Ciaran, trying and failing to talk to his friends, his head ducked, jaw clenched. There was someone mentally singing the Nyan Cat theme behind him. Sierra was halfway down the hallway, her face buried in a book, but I could see her eyes twitching, lip curling. The 2 of them were doing their best to not attract attention to the suited men, but I knew we were screwed. Jason's freak out in the middle of class, and then men privately talking to the professor. Sierra turned to her friend, her words reaching me in a tangle, a prod directly into the meat of my brain. Sierra's voice was louder, a hiss swamping out the barrage of voices collapsing into white noise. Fuck, are they here for us? Calm down. Syrian's British accent felt like a thunderclap. You're both looking pretty fucking obvious right now. His voice bled away, replaced by nothing. Harry Astor strode past us, and as usual his thoughts were null. His mind went deeper than oblivion. The cavern of nothing couldn't pierce through. Afflicted with telepathic abilities like the 12 of us, Harry didn't take part in the emergency meetings. He wanted nothing to do with us. Lana Duran? I jumped when a real voice cut into my thoughts. In front of me was one of the men in black. His smile was friendly enough. Would I be able to talk to you in regards to a report issued to us by your dean? The man's voice was slipping in and out of my mind, and like a barrier had been broken down in my mind. There was sudden clarity. The world around me came to a grinding halt, and all I could see was Harry. All I could hear was Harry. His thoughts, a sudden violent whirlwind slamming into my skull. Then I'll sever their limbs, one by one, head first and then legs. His head snapped up, and accompanying his voice, images of my own face, my brutal murder, bathed in scarlet, the others reduced to tangled body parts like a scattered doll pieces. I felt the prick of blade across my skin cutting into me, slicing me apart. I sensed him dragging our remnants, throwing us into a river. Lana, the voice was still speaking, and I was on my knees suffocating. Behind me, shadowy figures were grabbing Syrian and Sierra. We're going to die. Murdered by our classmate. This thing we have, it keeps going. Thinking, even after death. I think it's time we talk. That was a weird story, y'all. Creepy. I wished it was a little bit longer and it kind of got into more of a detailed backstory because it's very interesting. The next story I will read is called Things Keep Disappearing from My Apartment at Night by No Status 5845. Dear reader, after all, such stories usually begin with something inconspicuous, something insignificant. And so my story begins with the disappearance of the most ordinary things. Waking up in the darkness of my bedroom, I usually expected comfort, predictability. However, today something was off. My first step towards the kitchen to make coffee marked the beginning of a strange and unexplainable saga. The slippers that I usually took off before bed and left by the bedside were gone. Well, it's just absent-mindedness. Probably forgot where I put them. I thought, trying to convince myself. But as I felt around the floor, I realized they hadn't just casually wandered off into nocturnal darkness. And that's when suspicions arose. Walking out to the kitchen, I noticed that a vase of fresh flowers were missing from the table in the living room. Glanced into the dark corner of the room, as if expecting someone to be hiding there. But the silence remained impenetrable. I mixed my discontented thoughts with a tired sigh, not anticipating this was just the beginning. The entire day at the office felt like a mysterious fog. It wasn't thinking about a robbery since nothing valuable had disappeared. In theory, could I have somehow lost both slippers at once? Flowers? Maybe I just don't remember waking up at night and putting them away. I don't understand. Work seemed insignificant compared to the inexplicable disappearance of household items. I paced between desks, trying to understand what was happening. My subconscious whispered that it was unusual and something was confusing. But I tried to ignore these premonitions. Returning home, I hoped the house would become my fortress. But an invisible tension hung in the room. I felt goosebumps on my skin. I remember that moment in the morning when the slippers vanished and I tried to find the explanation. But my rationality hit a wall of the unknown and I felt that this nightmare was only just beginning. My world became increasingly fragile with each morning, discovering that another piece of reality vanished along with some item from my home. Doubts crept into my mind, and I increasingly suspected that the answers were hidden in the darkness of the night when it seemed I was losing control over myself. The solution was inevitable, a surveillance system. Every camera inside my apartment became a witness to this strange theater, where I was both the actor and the spectator. Night after night, I watched myself live through a stranger's eyes trying to unravel the mystery of my own insane sleepwalking. Waking up in the morning, I began reviewing the recordings. There I was, unquestionably me. But I couldn't notice anything strange in my sleep except for one thing. On all the cameras, a segment from 1:32 a.m. to 1:49 a.m. at night was cut out. It was a fragment when even the cameras couldn't penetrate, as if something inside me refused to reveal its secrets. In the darkness of my soul hid something I couldn't see even in the most nightmarish dream. The next morning arrived. That very moment, when the first rays of light barely illuminated the room, I woke up, feeling the dampness of dusk. My heart pounded, not yet fully realizing the surrounding darkness. But in the dark corner of my bedroom, I noticed a shadowy figure, tall, slender, with long bony arms. The frightening figure stood motionless, eyes fixed on me, as if conducting a detailed analysis of every thought. The fear emanated from its presence, and I felt it creeping into my soul like icy fingers seizing me. Suddenly breaking free from the bed, I rushed out of the room, feeling the dark gaze following me. Nausea from the fear engulfed me, but I didn't stop until I found myself outside, wearing only underwear, standing on the threshold of my apartment. In the end, I lied and told my family that I had to leave for business and asked them to move my things to another apartment. They asked about the reason, but I never told them the truth. Since then, I often wake up at night and stare into the dark corner of the room. That is a creepy story, but I hope y'all have a really good rest of your weekend. I love y'all so much. I will see y'all on Tuesday, but until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven on this beautiful Tuesday morning, back with some more ghost stories. Number 1. When I was in 7th grade, I didn't believe in ghosts. So I did an experiment to see what would happen, and I regret it to this day. So to start off this traumatizing story, one night I decided to search up rituals to do so I can see if I could have some kind of an experience. I don't remember the exact ritual I did, but I remember all lights must be off that is visible, and it must be dark outside. Then I did it, and immediately after I finished, I began disrespecting whatever may be out there. You aren't real. Show yourself. Don't be a little pussy, and do something, bitch. And almost right after I went silent, the temperature dropped and I got the chills so fast. I immediately ran and turned the lights on and ran upstairs because it scared the hell out of me. About 4 hours later, by this time, I forgot what I did, and I went downstairs to get ready for bed because I had school the next morning. I was kind of skipping down the stairs casually, and I jumped across the tiny hallway. To my right, in my peripheral vision, I see a dirty white dress, bluish pale bare feet, and arms all covered, and long black hair covering her face. Hovering. I tell you, she was hovering, at least 3 inches off the ground. It also kind of looked like she was hunching her back. Anyway, so I realized what I just saw and bolted to my bed and jumped under my blanket so fast and covered my face. I slept with the light on, and I was so terrified to even look. The temperature dropped super cold again, and I had to lay there all alone in the basement by myself. The story doesn't end there. My dream, it was almost as if I woke up and I looked at the doorway in the other room and she was looking back at me. For some reason, I wasn't scared of her, and I approached her. She was friendly, and I asked her if she was hungry, and she shook her head yes. Magically, I pulled out nachos, but she shook her head no. Then again, I pulled out raw meat, and she started devouring it. Then I woke up. It was time to get ready for school, and like everyone else, when I first woke up, I forgot what I dreamt about. As I was putting my socks on, half awake, I heard a whoosh, and I looked up very fast, like what the fuck? And then felt the gust of wind hit me, like something just passed the hallway very fast. Then it hit me. I thought about what happened the night before, and boom. Just like that, my heart sank. It got cold immediately. My heart was pounding, and so I started speeding, getting ready so I can get the hell out of there. And then again, whoosh. I saw something go by very quickly. I sat there silently, in shock and scared as hell, and stared at the hallway just waiting for something to happen again. And after just a few seconds, a little red ball, I'm not even joking, straight out of a horror movie, I was in disbelief until I heard it thud hit the wall. I didn't know what to do. Then I heard my neighbor honking. They took me to school every morning. I hurried and flipped my jacket inside out and put the hood over my face to avoid seeing anything, and I ran up the stairs and out the door. When I got home, my dad stayed home sick from work. I asked why, and he said, I don't know. I just woke up and started getting ready. And when I went to the bathroom, I started throwing up dramatically. I must have blacked out because I woke up laying in puke. I heard someone walking around, but when I got up, nobody was home. Then I told him what happened. He was in shock. We proceeded to bless the house with scriptures from the Bible, and I felt a lot safer, but still felt like something was watching me. But never had another encounter with her for the next 4 years, until one day with my girlfriend, who I never told this about, mostly because nobody believes me. We were getting fast food late one night, and randomly she said, "There's a creepy looking girl standing by that tree behind us." And I didn't even have to look to know. I asked her to give me a description, and she gave me the exact description of her. It was definitely her, and that is my scary experience. We've seen her twice since that, but it's always out of town, not by where it first happened. And who knows, I may see her again eventually. Weird, but as I write this, my phone is lagging and delaying as I type, which is kind of creepy. Number 2. I was spending the summer with my dad after I finished kindergarten before starting first grade. We lived in a double-wide trailer out in the sticks on a gravel back road, type of area where you had some woods to play in or head across the street, either recently harvest cornfield to play kickball or tag or some other childhood game. My dad and I lived with my dad's brother and his wife, as well as their 2 daughters. My cousins were a little older than me, about 4 years or so. We decided to play hide and seek one evening in the woods behind the trailer. So many spots to hide. Laying down behind a fallen tree, ducking in a riverbed. Heck, if you was real crafty, you could pick a tree and climb it till you could see the whole area. We're on like around 3 when my cousin said, "Is that an abandoned trailer?" When we all regrouped, and me and her sister both shot glances in the direction of her stare, and sure enough, there was. But it didn't look that old. Just had the standard moss on the sides and dirt built up you'd expect a trailer in the woods to have. We sat there and stared at it for a second until my eldest piped up again and said, "You guys want to check it out?" To which me and her sister, both young and eager to venture and rebel, quickly said yes. We get up right next to it, and we can see through the kitchen window, and it is definitely abandoned. But it was weird. Everything is so dusty and disorganized, but no rashed or ransacked, just kind of like an unorganized clutter. We got to the front door, and oddly enough, it was unlocked, so we get inside, and the amount of dust in the air is so thick you can feel it when you breathe, like trying to breathe through a t-shirt. We get to looking around, and there's so much cool stuff. An antique rotary phone, engraved wooden cooking utensils, old glass maple syrup decanters, etc. This place was like it was preserved in the 50s to 60s. We made our way back to the master bedroom, and it was so eerie. An old freshly made bed with a heavy-duty wooden frame, a vanity with the various perfumes and makeup items, even a small jewelry box, one of the ones with a ballerina in it. We start looking in the closet and see this old wedding dress preserved in a clear plastic wrap, but it was weird because it looked like it had less dust on it than any of the other things. That's when a cold chill ran straight up my back and made every hair stand up. I turned to my cousins and said, "I think we should leave now." And they agreed, but my oldest cousin grabbed the jewelry box and said, "Finders keepers," and took off with it. I wasn't going to fight her about it, and because I was younger and smaller, I really just wanted to get out of there. As we're walking out, we noticed one of the old candlesticks with a light bulb in it was on the table lit up like someone turned a switch on. But there's no way this place has electricity. We immediately were all spooked and run out the door. As we're running away, we look back through the kitchen window again, and we all see it. What looked like a silhouette of a very frail old lady, with visibly frizzy hair, but it was so dark, no features could be seen. My cousin still has a jewelry box to this day, and it still freaks me out. That's the end of this one. Please let me know what you think, and as always, I'll update you soon on another one of my paranormal encounters. I look forward to hearing all of yours as well. Number 3, me and my friends decided to go for a walk in the woods at night. Me and my friend John had some shrooms, so we took them. My other 2 friends did not take shrooms. 2 of us were on shrooms, 2 of us were not. It was in the woods of Massachusetts. It was during the beginning of spring, so there was a little bit of snow in the woods. We took a known path through the woods and eventually came to a river. The river led off a known path into the woods, so we followed the river into the woods off the path. We go to the decent spot to light a fire by the river and play some music with some portable speakers. We played band Tool song Extension, Intention, so we kept feeding the fire while smoking some cigarettes and listening to the music. Then the most insane thing happened. We all experienced the same thing. The 2 that were on shrooms and the 2 that were stone cold sober. So our experience can't be chalked up. You were tripping on shrooms, nothing happened. As we were watching the fire, we noticed a thick fog starting to come out of literally nowhere. It started off as a thin fog and then got thicker and thicker to a point we could not see 5 feet in front of us. Then a gust of wind came out of nowhere that consistently picked up with speed. While the gust wind was happening, a voice came with the wind. While the voice grew in volume, the wind got stronger. The wind matched the voice perfectly. It seemed like the voice was causing the wind. The voice didn't say anything specific. It just sounded like a Native American's deep guttural chant, kind of like a monk meditating and saying, Om. And as the voice grew and the wind grew with it, the voice sounded more and more angry. Then I shit you not, the ground just opened up in front of us and swallowed our fire. Like the earth just ate our freaking fire. Then the voice stopped along with the wind, and the fog slowly dissipated. After everything stopped, we all decided to get the hell out of there, so we ran back to the path and made our way out of the woods. We all still keep in contact and always bring it up now and then. John is my current roommate, and it happened probably about 15 years ago, and we still don't know what to make of it. Anyone got any theories? I'd love to hear them. Number 4. I want to start off by saying I am a 20-year-old female. I have always struggled with a bit of anxiety and depression, but it's to be expected because of some unfortunate life circumstances. Though it is not debilitating, and I'm still able to live a happy life without it affecting too much. My physical health isn't perfect either, but I wouldn't say I'm unhealthy. I don't smoke weed and I rarely drink. I don't do any other drugs, and I've never been diagnosed with any serious mental illness besides the depression and anxiety. I also have a sleep disorder that causes hypnoponic hallucinations that occur during the transition from sleep to wakefulness. I have also gotten sleep paralysis, though I don't get it much anymore. My hallucinations mostly consist of shadow figures, hands gripping onto walls, or coming from underneath the doors, distorted faces, pulsing objects, and floating objects. I have also experienced some auditory hallucinations like breathing next to my ear and an indescribable whispering. I've had this sleep disorder for about 10 years now, so I have gotten pretty used to it, but lately it's gotten worse. Now, I'm not necessarily religious, but I am agnostic, and I have always believed in demons and ghosts due to experiences I had in one of my old houses. This house was where the hallucinations. Lately, I've been hallucinating 6 or 7 times a night during different periods of the night. Normally, I just be able to ignore them and fall back to sleep, but these ones feel malicious. even taunting, like something is purposely trying to scare me. I won't go into super detail about each and every hallucination I have had recently, but I will go into detail about last night's because I had an hallucination that I have never had before. I got in bed around 1 a.m. last night and attempted to fall asleep. As soon as I shut my eyes, I started to feel anxious, but though I was in a good mood right before going to bed, I felt like there was a presence or something that I ignored as usual because I felt like it was just overthinking. Some time went by until I started to fall asleep. Before I could fully fall asleep, my eyes opened extremely quick and wide and my heart started racing. Felt like I couldn't breathe for a while, like there was a pressure pushing down on my chest. No, this was not a sleep paralysis. I could move, and I was able to close my eyes and try to fall back to sleep. But the same thing happens again. I am startled awake with a racing heartbeat, and everything looks red, except this time the red is much more vibrant. This happens about 6 to 7 times throughout the course of an hour, maybe 2. Each time the red becomes more and more vibrant until it looks like I'm looking through red-tinted sunglasses. I forgot to mention this, but I sleep with a light on, not super bright, bright enough to see everything into my room. I've slept with the light on since I started hallucinating. I couldn't take it anymore and ended up sleeping in the living room because I was so scared and I was getting no sleep. It stopped once I moved onto the couch. I find these hallucinations weird because it's more scarier than the figures and faces I've seen in the past. Even though it was just a red tint, it felt extremely malicious. Now, to this morning, I woke up feeling like I drank a whole bottle of vodka to myself, having to rush to the bathroom because I thought I was going to throw up. I am not pregnant. I didn't throw up, but I did end up sitting in there on the toilet for a while. I'm feeling a little bit better now, but also have this intense pressure on my head and neck. It's not a headache, but it feels like something is squeezing my skull. I wish I could explain the situation in more detail, but this has already turned into a full-blown essay, so I guess I'll settle. Anyways, does anyone know if this is demonic? I would normally just write it off as a weird hallucination, but the nausea and a head pressure is weirding me out. If you have any comments or questions, that would be great. Also, if anyone wants a part 2, I'd be happy to explain more experiences I've had, including ones with my sister and dad in the house where I started getting these hallucinations. So that is it for today. Know that I love y'all so much, and thank you so much for listening to these stories. I'll see y'all this Thursday. But until then, remember it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven on this beautiful Tuesday morning. We are doing the Curious Raven Thoughts segment today. Let's get into it. So, this is all started before I was born. My mom and her friend Hillary were playing with a Ouija board, and they kind of did a lot. And one time they got scared while playing with the Ouija board and threw it. She told me that you're never supposed to let the piece leave the board while playing. So she thinks that is what started them seeing things about their day. After that, she saw things like once she saw Hillary's dead uncle that even Hillary never met. She didn't know who it was until the next day. She described it to Hillary's mom and said that it was her brother. She also saw him a couple of times. She described him as very like a human, but you could kind of see through him. And he was white like a piece of paper. And she also saw this one figure that was very human shaped, very tall and black with no features. He has no fingers, no hands, just like a sharp nubs. And now I'm seeing him ever since my mom has stopped, and it's freaking me out. I've even seen him since I can remember. And I just told her about seeing him, and she got really scared, and now telling me all these memories. And then we somehow got to dreams, and I told her about the scary dream I had, and she was shocked. I remembered it. How could I not? It was when I was 3, and I had this dream. At first I saw was Christmas green wrapping paper. Then I saw my mom and her boyfriend at the time sleeping in bed, but they weren't really in bed. They were in the living room. I tried walking and I tried waking them up because I saw this huge hooded blob on the wall who couldn't get off the wall, but he would grab at me and try to reach out for me. Then I walked into my grandma's room and she was asleep, but not really. But she was also on the couch. When you walked into the bathroom, I opened her blue seashell curtains, and the man that my mom would see was there. And I just yelled and shut it and ran out. Not before her sublime looking sun decoration on her wall smiled. This eye smiled. I ran out, and this blind motorcyclist who only followed noise started chasing me. I yelled, and I figured out when he stopped following me, when I screamed so loud it was quiet. I then hid behind the couch my parents were sitting at, but I didn't see them. And I have no idea how I got behind the couch. The hooded man was talking to me, and I just yelled out, and my mom finally picked me up. All I saw was a motorcycle man. So I clawed at her eyes, and when she dropped me and yelled, I woke up with her covering her eyes and my grandma standing next to me on the floor by my mom. Took me to the hospital to get checked out, and she thought I was possessed for something, and the doctors thought I had a stroke, but there was no signs of anything. And for the next year, I had night terrors in my sleep and sleep paralysis. I remember one time where a girl who sounded like Jessie from Hey Jessie, but was all black, but behind the pillars of my basement where I was sleeping. And then when all I could do was stare at her, I couldn't move my fingers or anything. She walked up beside my bed and stood there for what felt like 2 hours, but I couldn't even move or make noise, so I couldn't wake up. I was sleeping with my mom at the time, so I had to sit through it quietly. And another time, I was at my dad's house and I woke up in the middle of the night, sat up for a while, and then looked over. Shadow witch. I don't know how. I was casting a shadow. It was very dark with no light coming from anywhere in my room. But when the shadow was looking at me and it had a fedora on, and anything I did, it did the opposite. It was like a person was facing me. When I would move my left hand, it would move its right hand. It was very weird. I've always seen that man, tall looking, skinny, featureless black figure, but they have really bony knees and elbows and their rib cage and their shoulder blades. It was like all pointy. It looked really scary. When I was describing this to my mom's friend, she also vividly remembers seeing something like this. I tried to look online to see if there was any way that we could get some help from not seeing these things, but my mom and her friend said it wasn't really scary. And it acted cocky for like a week, and her friend Hillary just ignored him for long enough. But my mom started acting weird when I was like 1.5. And ever since the night terror year, I sleepwalk and talk a lot. There was this weird cure to it. It was Hillary's other uncle who worked at this child charity, and he gave me a figure, and the figure came with these little coins, and I'll probably have one of these coins like maybe once every 4 months, or when I'm really scared, and I'll get them, and I'll mostly only see the figure. The other stuff would go away. But I've recently quite seen him a lot, and he scares me a lot, and I just stare back at him. He doesn't have a mouth, but I feel his joy in scaring me. Like if I feel that if he had a mouth, he would just be sitting there smiling. My friends are making fun of me, calling me schizo. They couldn't see a figure. I just convinced myself it was shadows, lying perfectly well. Honestly, he's darker than dark, like a black hole. I'm in the 6th grade, and I just randomly started drawing him 3 times a day. I would draw him and just rip the paper. I don't know. I just like drawing him. If I look hard enough in my room, I might find one of him somewhere. I just get scared and turn my lights off. I go to bed. I need to tell someone this, but I cannot find anything about him or about this creature. Maybe if I knew his name, I could call him by his name. It would be really amazing. I just wanted everyone to know this story. I'm not really sure about what sleep paralysis is. I just imagine it's like a ghost thing because I don't want to rewrite. And by the way, this is not false. I'm actually not sure if I believe it yet or if my mom is just toying with me. Hi, Curious Raven here. I know you're really young and I see shadow people too. This one is not your friend. You do not need to know his name. You need to just leave him alone. Do not give him any type of attention. He is thriving on it. If you see him, just turn over in bed and go back to sleep or start thinking of something completely different. Think of something happy, your happy place. It will help a lot. I'm not sure if you're religious or not, but if you believe in God, you tell God that you need his protection. In your mind, you tell the shadowy figure in a very authoritative voice that he is not welcome and he needs to leave your house in the name of God. And if you say that more and more and more, the less you should see of him. I hope that you take my advice because this thing seems like it is feeding off your fear and is not good for you. I hope this helps. Sleep paralysis, I really feel is like a demon coming to visit you because I have had that happen to me. And I have stated exactly what I told you to state, and it takes me out of my sleep paralysis and makes whatever it is go away. I wish you good luck. This is it for today. This was a short one. I will see y'all on Thursday. I actually have some roofing people coming to re-roof my home. So if y'all see a post that Saturday there's no video or next week there's no videos, it's because they are being loud. I just want to give y'all a heads up. I love y'all so much. I will see y'all Thursday. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven. On Sunday, I wanted to make up for the video I missed on Thursday for you guys. This is going to be a shorter video, very short. It is my thoughts with Curious Raven. It is about a spiritual cleansing that went wrong and it made things worse. I'm going to read you the story and then I'm going to tell you my suggestions, my thoughts. And if you have any, please leave them down in the comments below. Here's the story, y'all. My girlfriend had been experiencing a lot of irritability, anxiety, and crying. I don't know why, but I thought about doing some spiritual cleansing here at home. Maybe I noticed strange nuisances and some things, some bad smells around the house. I performed a cleansing ritual with some incense I had at home, and during the ritual I spoke, asking any negativity or entity to leave. That same day, many things started falling. Things that wouldn't fall just from the wind. For example, the first thing that fell was the key that is stuck to the wall on a hook with a double-sided tape. It all fell, the hook and the key, and it made a loud echoing noise through the wall when it fell. I went there, glued it back, tried to pull it off with all my strength, and it didn't come off. And of all the keys hanging, only mine fell. It's just me and my girlfriend and her brother living here. Well, then at night, the little jar I used to burn the incense was knocked off a table as I passed by. At that exact same moment. That really freaked me out. Then, at night, an object in the bedroom on a shelf, which has been there for months, my snorkel, was thrown to the floor at least 20 centimeters away from the shelf. We ignored it and went to sleep. The next morning when I woke up, my key was on the floor again. But only my key. And it was hanging before. Everything that fell was either my belongings or related to the ritual I performed. Well, I bought some Palo Santo and asked my girlfriend to help me go through the house. We did another ritual, sending whatever it was away. And for a day, we were fine. But she still felt a tightness in her chest, which went away after a day. In the afternoon, I started having tightness and anxiety in my chest. Then I asked if that's what she had felt, and she said yes. And sometime later, she started feeling it again and went to lie down, hugged each other, and then it passed. But at night, as I tried to fall asleep in the early hours of the morning, I heard noises that were getting closer and closer to the bedroom. When I thought it's here, I started feeling intense chills, sweating, palpitations, anxiety, and insomnia. I could only sleep for 3 hours, and then the next day I burned Palo Santo again. And I started smelling vomit in the bathroom while taking a shower. And this smell of vomit randomly appears throughout the house, in the hallway, in the living room. Then at night again, I try to sleep and randomly my heart starts to tighten and I start feeling very anxious. Last night I even woke up to this. I had already fallen asleep and everything. Well, this is my situation. I don't know if I made things worse by trying to spiritually cleanse the house, if whatever it is now, is it inside of me? If I disrespect this spirit, and is it now seeking retaliation? I don't know if I should just ignore it until it gets bored and stops, or if I should do a heavier cleansing with other herbs. My intentions were good. I just wanted to relieve my girlfriend's anxiety. I seek advice. Thank you. When I read this story the first time, because this is not the first time I read this, because I was trying to think of how I'm going to respond to this, because I know you're actually going to be listening. I am not a professional at all, but I have been really mixed in with the spiritual world for years, and I have been able to talk and see ghosts for a long time. I don't really call it a ritual. I don't know why that gives me the icky when you say ritual. I just call it cleansing the house, cleansing the space of negative energy. And you're supposed to use sage with it. You get a shell and then you put the Palo Santo in the shell with the sage and then you burn it all together. And as you're burning it, you walk around with a feather and you waft the smoke in all the corners of your house, and you set good intentions and you say it over and over again and you talk to the spirit and let them know they're not welcome in your home. And if you are religious, you can tell them in God's name they're not allowed to be in your house and they need to leave. You have to put your foot down. You got to be, this is my house, leave. I really do think you pissed whatever it is off. For some reason, when I first heard this story, I pictured an older woman. Maybe she was sick and she died in the apartment. And that's what I see. Like it's her house. And she was fine until y'all are feeling the spirit's energy. And she's feeling anxious and feeling upset. And you just need to talk to her. I don't know if it's a girl, but I mean that's just what I felt and sensed when I read this story. And yes, spirits can make different smells, and that's why I said maybe she was sick, maybe she died of a respiratory infection or lung cancer or something like that, because you'll keep feeling tightness in your chest and you're smelling vomit and things like that. So I'm thinking sometimes these spirits too don't know they're dead. We had a younger teenage boy that wouldn't leave our house and he kept messing with my little 3-year-old. And I finally let him know, you have passed away. This is not your home anymore. And it's time for you to go. This is our home and you need to go into the light and go find your family and be at peace. And if you just relay this to spirits, they're confused sometimes and they don't know what's going on and they're scared. And then sometimes you do get evil ones. But I don't sense that with this. I feel like she feels like you're attacking her, and so she is kind of retaliating back on you, messing with you. So put your foot down, redo the cleansing of your house, but with sage, and speak out loud and talk to the spirit like they're a person. And even if you say, look, if you don't want to leave, don't leave. You don't have to leave. But can we please dwell in this house together and we will not bother each other? And can you please stop making my girlfriend and myself feel sick and feel the tightness in our chest? We don't want to feel that anymore. And see what happens. You have a lot of different ways you can approach this. I tried to give you as much information that I have used myself and it works. Can't guarantee it's going to work for you, but it's something you can try. Good luck. I am praying that this helps. And please, get down in the comments, talk to us about it. If you have any other questions, just talk to me about it. Or if when you do it and maybe it settles down in your home, write me on Reddit and let me know what happens. You can also, I also do this too. I take salt, table salt, and I line my doors on the outside with salt. Just a line at the threshold of the door on the outside to keep the evil negativity out of my house. Also, you can use chalk and put crosses on above each door, on the frame, and each window of your house. And those are things that I have done when I cleanse my home. I try to cleanse my home, especially if I feel like the energy is kind of off and it's just odd. Those are the things that I do. I hope this helps. Please let me know how it goes. That is the end of this advice and stories. And if you have any advice or anything, write it down below. Let's try to help him out. All right. I will see y'all on Tuesday. I love y'all so much. Please like and subscribe.
Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross